Good afternoon. Good afternoon, students, staff, faculty, and guests. I'm Dr. Scott Liebhauser, Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs and Dean of Online Learning. For those of you who are new to our campus, welcome to Indiana Tech. We are happy to have you here as we celebrate veterans and service members this week leading up to Veterans Day. At this time, we ask that all of our veterans who have served in the United States military to please rise so that you may be recognized. And now we ask that you please join our veterans and rise for the singing of our national anthem by Dr. Timothy Raines, Director of the Multicultural Engineering Program. If you're a veteran, please join me in saluting our flag during the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's round glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet waved o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Please be seated. Thank you, Dr. Raines. It's wonderful. Before welcoming Sergeant Alan Lynch to the stage, I would like to take a moment to share with you some background on how we came to be here today. As part of her research writing course each year, Professor Carrie Roteseiler and her students conduct interviews with military veterans and service members in the Fort Wayne community as a part of the Veterans Oral History Project. It is a service learning project now in its third year at Indiana Tech. This goal is not to only provide students with opportunities to research and write about this community, but also to learn from these men and women, to forge a relationship with, and a better understanding of people who serve our country. Less than 0.5% of American citizens serve in the armed forces, resulting in what has become known as the knowledge gap between civilians and veterans. Professor Roteseiler's goal is to narrow that gap by facilitating a project that benefits both students and veterans by providing the opportunities for communication and understanding. The word hero is ubiquitous in today's society and has lost a bit of its rich meaning and intent. Genuine heroes are actually quite rare today. A hero is someone who has put their life on the line to save or protect others. In our midst today, we are honored to have a real-life hero. I would like to now introduce to you Sergeant Alan Lynch. He was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor, the nation's highest and most prestigious personal military decoration, for his service in the Vietnam War. On December 15, 1967, Sergeant Lynch was engaged in a firefight during the Battle of Tam Quan. When his platoon's point man was wounded, without hesitation, Sergeant Lynch rushed to his aid. As the battle continued, he became pinned down, but aided and defended wounded soldiers until help arrived. His citation reads in part, Observing 3 wounded comrades lying exposed to enemy fire, Sergeant Lynch dashed across 50 meters of open ground through a withering hail of enemy fire to administer aid. As he writes in his book, Zero to Hero, From Bullied Kid to Warrior, under extreme pressure, we become our real selves. Sergeant Lynch's story is one of inner strength, resilience, and overcoming challenging life circumstances. His act of bravery and courage epitomize a life of significance and worth. Please join me in welcoming Sergeant Lynch to the stage.
Thank you. Well, thank you. You know, I've been thinking about how I wanted to do this, and I think what I'm going to do is begin at the beginning and then kind of take you through, because as I'm looking out, I can see, except for some of you who are very conspicuous by, you know, your hair and other things, the world that I grew up in is totally alien to the world that you grew up in. Let me begin then back in when I was born. I was born October 28th, 1945, about 2 months after the end of World War II. It was a time when America was euphoric. We had just come through the Great Depression, and my parents were kids during the Great Depression, and I was raised on Depression stories of my dad having, and his father going down to the railroad where there was a nice slow grade, and having to kick coal off of coal cars so that they could heat their apartment for the night. And all the kids in his neighborhood and their fathers were doing that. I was told of how to make depression bread, which was part flour, part sawdust. I was raised on stories of food lines. And because of the Great Depression and because of rationing that went on during World War II, they were not living in the land of plenty. They were living in a land of want of a job. My dad used to get up in the morning at 5:30 to meet his father at 6 o'clock, 6:30 in the morning to work the milk truck that my grandfather was lucky enough to drive with a horse. And my dad's job was to run milk from the milk truck up to the house so my grandfather could complete the job early and go do handyman work for the people that lived up in Beverly, which was a little more well-to-do part of Chicago. So the way I was raised was very much, you don't know what's going to happen in the future, so you never waste anything. I was raised with things like this. If mom cooked it, you eat it. Period. My grandchildren are hung up on things like texture. That dog would hunt, not at all. My granddaughter, I lost my daughter-in-law several years ago, and we ended up doing a lot of watching of my grandkids who were very small at the time. My granddaughter's now 22, oh my God. And she wouldn't eat mac and cheese because it didn't come out of a blue box. That would have lasted about 2.5 seconds in my dad's house. I was raised with, I'm the adult, you're the child, shut your mouth and do what you're told. I was raised with, do you want me to go get the belt? I was raised with, do you need your mouth washed out with soap? See, we lived in a time when, and this is true for me, I don't know about how others people's were raised, except me and the people that I was with. But I was raised in an area where women for the most part, if they were moms, they were home. And consequently, we couldn't get away with anything. From some window somewhere, Mom was there. And there was this kind, you guys know about Big Brother, right? Well, there was Big Mother. And if we did something wrong, by the time I got home, my mom knew. And God help me if I smarted off to an adult. She liked the bar of tinctures of green soap. You guys probably don't know what that is. It just tastes terrible. Because if I was caught cussing, if I was caught smarting off to an adult, I got my mouth washed out with soap. And if it was bad enough, the dreaded words, "Wait till your father gets home." And believe me, that was, even if he did nothing to me, the wait was terrifying. So that's kind of the life I grew up in. It's funny. I remember kindergarten. The first day I went to kindergarten, we lived in Roseland, Illinois, and we lived on a 123 West 111th place. I had to memorize that address because if I got lost, I could ask a policeman or an adult, and they would get me home. That's kind of the naive way that we looked at life back then. My mom walked me across 111th Street, which was very busy, walked me 5 blocks down to Van Vlissington grade school, walked me up to the class, and all the way she's telling me, remember this, remember that, okay, it's just straight home, and then you hit the church, and then you hang a right, and you know where we live, right? So Mom dropped me off for kindergarten at 5 years old, gave me a hug and a kiss goodbye, and said, I'll see you when you get home. And from that day forward, every nice day, we walked to school. Every rainy day we walked to school. Every snowy day we walked to school. And I would add uphill through the snow both ways barefoot, but I know you wouldn't buy that. But it's true. Well, it's not. But that's what it is. And it cracks me up now today because we're talking about the environment, and I see Mommy and Daddy with their little boys and girls down at the bus stop because little Mary and little Johnny might get cold. And I'm sorry if that's insulting, but it's just, I'm 77, I can say what I want. Chalk it up to senility. I earned it. So that's kind of like what it was. We roamed our neighborhood. We rode bikes. We played in the street. We took public transportation. My dad didn't own a car until we moved to Homewood, which was a suburb of Chicago. So my dad took public transportation to and from work. If my mom wanted to go visit my grandmother, we took public transportation. We took a streetcar. We took a bus. We took a train. And it kind of cracks me up because we all like to use cars. My daughter is big into the environment, except when it's hot and she needs the air conditioning on. But we had no air conditioning. So all our windows were open. We played outside. Every day, there was no sitting in the basement with the video games. And that's how I was raised. And then we moved to Homewood. And I went from having a bedroom to my bed being on, the table. What would happen is when it was time for me to go to bed, I would go to bed in my mom and dad's bedroom, which was at the back of the trailer. When they got ready to go to bed, they would create a bed on the on this table thing. It kind of sunk down and folded up and whatnot, and that's where I slept. Now, my dad, being a factory guy, got up at 5:30 to go to work at 6 to be picked up because he worked 7 to 3:30. And so for the rest of my life, as long as I can remember, when my dad was up, everybody was up. So going into the Army and getting up at 5:30 wasn't no thing. I remember this place for 2 reasons. One, we had no bathroom in the trailer. We had to go down to the community showers and bathroom to take care of the wants and needs of nature. And I can remember my mom and my dad in their robes and me in my robe walking down to get our showers. And that's how we did that. We did that for about a year and a half, almost 2 years, and then we moved to heaven. Lake Eliza, Indiana, rural Route 2, used to be a big place in the 50s. We had an acre and a half of land and woods and all kinds of things, and my dad decided that we're going to have a garden. So we had about a 1/4 acre garden. I had to cut the rest of it with a lawnmower, and I had to take care of the garden. At 7 years old, well, all of my life, I had chores. Now, let me tell you about my first one, because I was 4. See, we have it so easy when we wash clothes. Washer, dryer, you know, you throw it in, you throw the stuff, boom, you close it, and away you go. To wash clothes, now at 4 years old, you got to think about this. And mothers across America, don't faint. But to wash clothes, you had 2 tubs in the basement. One was a pre-soak and one was rinse. You would take your dirty clothes and you would put them in pre-soak, and you would fill up your washing tub, which had an agitator in it, and you would put your soap in there, and then you would take the wash from the pre-soak and you would put it in there, and it would wash and agitate and whatnot. When that was done, you put it in rinse, where it would sit. Then you would empty the tub, and then you would fill the tub with clean water after you washed it out with all the soap and dirt and whatever. Then you would put the clothes back in the washer to be rinsed, and it would agitate for a while. And this is where it got kind of cool for a kid that was 4 years old. My job was to take the clothes out of the rinse water and run them through the wringer. Now, the wringer had 2 rollers. Some of you remember that. And what you did is you put the clothes in there, and it would wring them out, and they would fall into the basket. Now, what was cool, it scared me at first because I got my hand caught right in the wringer, and it went through. And I'm screaming for my mom, and she came down, and she said, just hit the button, and it pops open. So I closed it down, I continued to work, and after a little while, I was kind of like, I got it up to my forearm. Oh, this is cool. Oh, bam. And I hit. And it was, boys being boys. So that's how we did. And then my mom would hang the clothes outside and let them air dry. I was going to say something about the environment here, but I won't. So that's the way we wash clothes. My job in Lake Eliza was to weed the garden, water the garden, pick the fruit, do the whole 9 yards. We had chickens, I fed the chickens, I cleaned out the chicken coop, which is just a joy. But it was great because after I got done with my chores, I could get on my bike and we could ride. I was swimming by myself at Lake Eliza, which was 3 miles down the country road, without any adult supervision. Me and my friends would go down and swim. We were free-range kids. That was the good part of growing up back then, is there were no bubble wrapping your children. There was no helmet putting on, and, you could do a lot of things. I could take my dad's Ford 10 and go rabbit hunting at 8 years old because I knew all about gun safety. I had a BB gun. Me and my friends used to have wars with our BB guns because it was, still at the end of World War II when we were playing Army and we were playing Cowboys and First Nations, or is it Native Americans? Anyway, we were playing cowboys in that. And we were doing all these cool things. And one day, one of us decided, wouldn't it be cool if we used our BB guns? Then we could make sure that we shot somebody. And it worked until we had to sneak into my dad's garage to dig a BB out of one of my friends. We didn't play after that. But it was cool while it lasted. We made rafts. And everything was going so good, except my grades in school, because I hated school. I was too busy just going out, and besides, I was just going to be a factory worker. What did I need to learn anything for? About halfway through 3rd grade, three bullies came to our class. And they, over the next several years, would make my life a living hell. I won't name them, I'll just call them Larry, Moe, and Curly. They made sure that I had a horrible, horrible 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. It was not cyberbullying. They didn't hurt my feelings. Well, they hurt my feelings, but not in that way. It was everything from practical jokes in gym class, and we all had to shower. Have you ever played with rat tails in the shower? Got plenty of those, among other things. And it was not fun. My grades suffered. I found that I had no friends. No one wants to hang out with a loser. My grades were horrible. I hated it. I hated school. I found every way in the world not to get on the bus to go home. If I could figure a way to walk or ride my bike, I would do that rather than get on a bus. Because what would happen is I'd get on the bus and I'd be kind of moved to the back of the bus. Anybody that's ever rode a school bus knows smart kids sit in the front and the rest of us sit in the back. That's where you get picked on and things happen. And that's what happened when I moved back there. See, my mom, my dad was one of these guys that he believed that men work. And I can't tell you how many times he said to me, a man that does not support his family is not a man. And occasionally my mom would have to work and he would just get majorly depressed about it because he felt like a failure. So that's kind of where he came from. So my dad was working 2 jobs. He'd go to work at 5:30, 6 o'clock, whatever time he left. He would get home somewhere between 11 and 12 o'clock. And then he would rinse and repeat. He did that as long as I can remember. I think all the way up until I got out of the Army, he was working 2 jobs. Sometimes 3, he would work weekends. He did everything he possibly could to bring money home to the family. And of course, with that, I was raised with, I put a roof over your head, clothes on your back, and food on your table. Now you get out there and do what I tell you. So because my dad wasn't around a lot, my mother was a big influence. My mother was a pacifist. I had been held back, because I don't know if they do that now, but I got sick, and I missed about 4 or 5 months of school, so they held me back a grade. So I was always a little taller than everyone in school, which is, if you're a bully, what you do is you beat up the big guy and you get a reputation. I was the big guy, and I was afraid to fight because I thought I would hurt somebody. And my mom had me absolutely convinced. It wasn't until I got in the Army and realized that it takes a whole lot to knock out an eye. You practically have to get in there and, well, never mind. But, see, I gave fear a place inside of me, and fear took over. First, I was afraid of hurting somebody. Then I was afraid of getting hurt. Now, here's how smart I am. This is genius. I'm getting beat up every day. My eye ain't popping out. My jaw ain't getting broke. The worst I got was a black eye and a big fat lip. That was it. And yet, every time I tried to fight, I just couldn't. Fear took over like a cancer. I was afraid to get hurt. I was afraid to hurt. I was afraid to succeed. I was afraid. The only time that I was really comfortable, and this was probably one of the best benefits I got out of being bullied, was I learned to be comfortable being alone. And it's been both a blessing and a curse. I am very comfortable when I'm by myself or with she who must be obeyed, Susie, may she live forever. I have found that I have a lot of acquaintances. I've had the blessing of very few real friends. Going through this in grade school and high school taught me what real friendship is. Friends are there when nobody else is. Acquaintances come and go. They just come and go. So I'm in grade school, I get to junior high, I'm miserable, everything's not going well, I hate school, I graduate from 8th grade by the skin of my teeth. We decide to move back to Chicago. We moved to a place called Dalton. I went to Thornridge High School, first graduating class, four-year graduating class from Thornridge. It's a great place. I can start over. Nobody knows me. I am brand spanking new. In fact, I'm so new, we moved back to Roseland, just about a block away from where I was when I was a little kid, and I used to walk 6 blocks to take the bus to go to Dalton, because we were kind of cheating a little bit, to go to Dalton so I could get on the bus to go to Thornridge, until they found us out, then we had to move. High school was basically the same thing. See, here's the second lesson I learned. No matter where you go, there you are. You can change everything in this world, but you can't change you. I changed schools. No one knew me. I changed homes, neighborhood. No one knew me. Brand spanking new. New reputation, I thought. And then one day, someone decided to stand up and give me a push. And I was right back to being that kid. I didn't change in here. This is where change is. Right here, in here. Change this, you change the world. Simple as that. So I go right back to it. I have 3 friends. Same guys like me. We wanted nothing to do with school. I went to no proms. I went to no basketball, football, baseball, no clubs, no nothing. I went to school and I went home. That's it. And I hung out with my friends. Now, my friends were kind of entrepreneurs. We liked money. Had I been good enough to get a girlfriend, she'd have been treated all right. I had a buttload of money. See, what we did is in the wintertime, we shoveled snow. What we found was that all of these nice people that lived in our neighborhood, after they got home after a hard day's worth of work, they didn't want to go out and shovel. And this is before snow blowers. Now, this is back when you shoveled with a shovel. So what we did is we shoveled snow. We'd meet after school. We'd go out and we'd shovel snow. We made $100 one night, and that was a lot of money back in 1960-something or other. And in the summertime, we'd cut grass, we'd wash cars. And then we found out that we could make bicycles, because at that time you can go into the garbage dump and you can find these old bikes that people threw away, and we would make bicycles and sell them. So we all had money, just no one to spend it on except ourselves, and there weren't no video games back then. In my freshman year, I failed algebra. And my dad, being my dad, said, "Your mother is not going to be punished for your failure. So you're going to go to summer school and you're going to pass algebra, and you're going to ride your bike the 3 miles from our house to Thornton High School. And you're going to do that there and back, and if you fail at any other class, that's what's going to happen." So I learned another very important lesson. Failure has consequences. Don't fail. Now, that didn't mean I succeeded greatly. I made a whole lot of D's, but I didn't fail, and I didn't have to go to summer school. But when I graduated, see, back in 1960s, there was only 2 places that boys went when they graduated high school. Well, 3. You went to the trades, which would get you a deferment. You went to college, which would get you a deferment, or you got drafted. Period. I was a 19-year-old kid that had done everything I possibly could to limit what I could do when I graduated. There was no college in my future, none. My mom and dad were both working people, and unless I got a scholarship, that wasn't going to happen. Second thing, I hated getting my hands dirty. Most of us worked on bikes and cars. I liked it as long as I got money, But just to go out and kind of tinker around with a car and stuff like that, nah, not my wheelhouse. So I got a job in a factory. Oh, and this is funny. I got my first job when working with my dad. I was a janitor in a factory that made hot water heaters. And as a janitor, I had to clean up all the bathrooms and all the offices. And as my dad is showing me around, Tetco metal products, as my dad is showing me around, he takes me into the men's locker room. He kicks open the first commode door. I almost pass out. It is not like at home where I take care of business. Oh, no. It is filthy, dirty, nasty, and it was like each door he kicked open, it got worse. And I'm an 18-year-old boy. Well, let's see, I'm 17, just almost going to be 18. And he takes me into the men's locker room. Back then, men's locker rooms had, shall we say, a variety of artistic pictures. Yeah, we'll go with that. And I looked at those, and he looked at me, and he said, well, just because they're there doesn't mean you have to look at them. And I said, Dad, I'm 17. What do you think? Yeah. So the bad part about this whole job was my dad inspected when I got done. And I'm looking at these commodes and other things, and I'm thinking to myself, how in the world am I going to clean this? And that's where my little gray cell started working. And I remembered a great big hose and these great big rubber gloves and brushes. And I cleaned those commodes. You could eat, no, probably not. But they were really clean. And when I got done with everything, I could do my homework, which was great because I was getting paid to do my homework. So my dad came in and did the inspection, and he looked at the commodes. And he said, how in the did you do that? And I said, a high-pressure hose, lots of bleach, and a lot of soap, and a big honking brush, because I ain't touching none of that. And he said, great job. And I was like, wow. Getting a great job from my dad was like trying to pull teeth from a crocodile. When that great job hit, I was like 20 feet tall. So that's how I got myself through high school. After high school, I had no other things I could do, so I went to work for Tetco. And then, being that I was, golden boy that cleaned the bathrooms and everybody liked me because I was really good at it, I was working in shipping, and I made the mistake of sitting down on the job before my first break because I had nothing else to do, I thought. The boss came up, he looked at me, he says, hi, what you doing? I says, well, I just got done doing this, I'm just sitting down for a second. He says, uh-huh. He walked in, came back out, says, here's your check, you're out of here, you're fired. I'm fired. Why did I get fired? I took a break when he wasn't supposed to. Then I get home, and my dad gets home from work, and he says, I understand you got fired today. He says, yeah, I got fired. He says, well, that's too bad. He says, your rent's still due at the end of the month. See, when I graduated high school, my dad said there's no free rides in life, and so I had to start paying rent. So I had to find another job, which I did. But then I decided, you know what, I'm going to get drafted. It's time to get in the Army. The Army was the best experience of my life. Now, you have to understand, I'm a white kid from a white neighborhood going to a white school. I think we had one African American in the school, one. I joined the Army. I go down to Fort Knox, Kentucky, and I am in a barracks with people that don't talk like me, because they're talking like this here, how y'all doing? And a whole different set of words that would get you into a fight in Chicago, but I guess was just part of the way Southern people talk. I was in a barracks with white people, black people, Latino people, Asian people. I was in a barracks with people that had some college and that had maybe a year of high school. It was a cross-section. And here's what our barracks looked like. It was double-decker bunks. We had 25 people on the first floor, and 24 people on the first, 24 on the second, and squad leader rooms. Going to the washroom, there was no privacy. This is going to bring back some memories, ain't it? The commodes were right next to each other. I mean, if you sat down to take care of business, your knees were touching somebody else's knees, most likely. When you showered, we had 4 shower spigots in a very small room for 50 people to shower in. Gone were the nice, long showers at home. I learned how to shower completely in 30 seconds or less. I mean, it was speed showering. We had a long tray, a long board that was in front of all the sinks, and that's where we put all of our shaving gear. We actually had to adjust somebody's attitude who insisted on putting his underwear up there where we put our toothbrush. And it was not a nice conversation. I learned in basic training that it doesn't matter what you look like. It's, can you get the job done? Our drill sergeant made one thing very, very clear. We either all work together or we will be punished as a platoon. One guy steps out of line, everybody does push-ups. One guy falls out on a run, everybody runs around again and picks him up and then does an extra lap. We worked together. I wish I could take the Congress and stick them in this kind of a basic training unit for just, 6 months, maybe 3 years. What we learned was that a lot of the stuff we're taught at home doesn't work when you're right next to people that you have to depend on. And so we all learned to work together. Bigots learned to work with people they didn't like. Everybody learned to work together to get the job done because our first pass, we had to pass inspection, and everybody had to pass so we could get that pass. So that's what it was like. So I also learned that I could run, I could shoot, and for not having shot a gun since I was like 10 years old, I'm a pretty darn good shot. We learned to run with our rifles. We learned how to do all kinds of stuff. And I learned how to push myself farther than I ever did in civilian life, which is why I love the Army so much, because it forced me to go past what I thought I could do. About halfway through basic training, I found out I wasn't as dumb as I thought I was. Seemed I had passed a lot of the tests that they give you a higher level than I thought, and they gave me the opportunity to go to officer candidate school at Fort Benning, Georgia. I think it's now Fort Moore, named after Hal Moore, who was the 1st Division commander of the 1st Cavalry Division in Vietnam. Okay. So I go to OCS, and I'm really excited because I go to infantry advanced training. I go to leadership school. I'm thinking I'm really good because I'm now a squad leader, and I'm actually held it more than 2 days. I almost held it a week before they got rid of me. I was really in shape. I was doing good, and I get to go to OCS. OCS is like basic training and advanced infantry training on steroids. The harassment is unbelievable. Just unbelievable. You eat a square meal. That means you sit like this. Your eyes are straight ahead. You scoop off the plate. You bring it up. You bring it over. You put it in. You bring it back. You bring it back down. You take your glass of whatever you're drinking up, straight over, drink it, put it down. Everything is regimented. When you left the mess hall, you had to say, when you got up to leave the mess hall, you had to say, "Excuse me, candidates." And a lot of times just to scroll around, we go, "Excuse me, cantaloupes." Excuse me a minute. I lasted 4 weeks. And it was, again, one of those situations of I had changed somewhat in here, but not enough. I was still a young 19-year-old punk kid, and I got full of myself, and I thought that I could make it. One day, we had to do things like get pogey bait. You guys know what pogey bait is? Okay, pogey bait is everything you're not supposed to have. In our case, it was fried pies, moon pies, Hostess Twinkies, whatever. So it was my turn to buy it. Now, we had an honor code that kind of was, I will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate anyone who does. So I walked back to the barracks with 2 bags of pogey bait, but I was smart. I had all the stuff I could have on top of the bag, like denatured alcohol and some cotton products that I could use, that we could use to put our bunks on so it wouldn't scrape the floor, because our floors had to be spit shined. So we had to do that. So I get back and I get met by this little TAC officer, about that high, a little smart mouth, lieutenant. I really liked him. And he said, "Candidate Lynch, what's in the bag?" Now, being smart and having been with a few Southerners, I learned, "Sir, I have in the bag denatured alcohol." "Sir," and I kept going, and he kept going, and I finally, it was, "Sorry, I got pogey bait in the bag." Okay, he went ballistic, turned red, jumped up and down, spun around in circles, his eyes bulged out, wanted a company formation. Got a company formation, and I had to make sure that every member of our company got a piece of candy or the pogey bait that I had. That wasn't enough. I had to sing, "Here's some candy I bought for you." They would sing back, "We thank you," 150 some times. By the time we got done, I had an attitude problem. And there was only one way I was going to adjust the attitude, and that was to do the thing that my mom told me I should not ever do, pick on someone smaller than me. And we were going on our way to the bayonet course, which was right down the road, and he turned to me and he said, "We're going to drop you next week. It's the 4th week drop, and you're going to be done. Not only that, if you quit right now, I guarantee you can be drinking beer downtown tonight." And he was absolutely right. I did a DOR, drop on request. I packed my stuff, which was very quickly done, moved out to the headquarters company, and that was the end of my OCS. From there, I went to Germany. I served just about 2 years in Germany. While I was in Germany, I got 2 Article 15s. That's non-judicial punishment, because I smarted off to my sergeant and I went able to help a buddy out. 2 Article 15s, 15 days confined to the barracks, 15 days extra duty, 7 days pay in a suspended bust. And right at the time my second Article 15 hit, I was realizing that I needed to do something. I had come a long way, but I really needed to test myself. I needed to prove myself to myself. So I volunteered for Vietnam. It was one of the worst and best decisions I ever made. I got to serve with the best unit in Vietnam. Sorry if you served somewhere else, but it was the 1st Cavalry Division, and it was amazing. The best people I ever was with in my life. After 50 years, we still have a relationship with some of the people that I served with. I saw a lot of combat. I saw a lot of horror. I saw some terrible things. One of the worst was my best friend being shot by friendly fire. And it's an important story that I like to share every time I talk, because it says a lot about a lot of things. See, in the Army, back in the late 80s, early 90s, we had a thing called Non-Commissioned Officer Development Program, where we would have to do what they call hip pocket instruction. And I was going through therapy at the time because I had some pretty bad PTSD. And to make sense of my friend's death, I had to find a way to use it in a positive way. And I worked very hard to figure out how to do that. So I'm going to tell you the story. Jerry Bryans was a guy that lived in Schullsburg, Wisconsin. He was a farm boy. He was kicked in the head by a horse when he was little, almost died. He was struck by lightning, ended up in the hospital because he was on a tractor as a thunderstorm came up, and almost died. So when we got to Vietnam and we came in country together, he would tell this story, and he would tell it in a way that would just make us laugh hysterically. About 3 strikes and you're out. He said, you know, I was almost killed twice, once by a horse, once by lightning. He says, if I get wounded here, I know I'm going to die. But he would say it in a way that we never took him seriously. One day we were in a forest that looked a lot like Wisconsin. Just unbelievably like Wisconsin. It was surrounded by, of course, jungle because we're in Vietnam. And we had lunch and we were talking about going back to the world here and going fishing and doing all this stuff. And Jerry and I finished the conversation. We got the order to move out, and we moved out. And our appointment got about maybe, I think, 200 meters out as we started walking into this other area. And he came back and he started giving us the sign of he's got movement. So we deployed into a combat, hasty fighting positions is what we call them. My buddy Jerry got behind a tree. I got behind a log. Our machine gunner got set up, and we got ready because you never know what's going to happen in a meeting engagement like this. You don't know how they're going to deploy. You don't know how many there are. You don't know what's going to happen. Our platoon leader goes running up to the front with his RTO radio operator, and all of a sudden we hear very loudly, in the military we always do it 3 times, cease fire, cease fire, cease fire, they're friendly. Everybody was passing the word. I stood up, Jerry stood up, the machine gunner shot him with the machine gun. And it jammed in the first round because it was filthy dirty. Jerry went down like a stone. The machine gunner had his head somewhere deep, dark, and uncomfortable. He wasn't paying attention, and in a combat situation, you can't afford not to pay attention. We medevac Jerry out. He died on the helicopter. I didn't know that. I put my M16 under his chin, and I told him, if Jerry dies, I'm going to kill you in the next firefight. You're a dead man. And I did it in front of God and everybody. So over the next week, people kept coming up to me, telling me what a great guy Jerry was, talking to me about how wonderful he was. About a week later, I found out that he had died on the helicopter, but I had a long time to think. I went up to, I'll call him John, and I said, I'm not going to kill you. You have to live with the fact that you killed one of our own. That's what you have to live with. Now, here's the important part. Not that the rest wasn't important, but the really important part was John had a choice. He could continue to be that guy, or he could change. Very slowly, he earned our trust back. And when I left Vietnam, he was a squad leader. See, no matter what you've done in life, there's always an opportunity to be a different you if you want to be. He had 2 roads he could have traveled. He chose the right one. Now, I've never seen him since. I'm going to leave him exactly where I left him as a squad leader. And my hope is that he lived the life that Jerry couldn't live. On December 15th, 1967, I earned the Medal of Honor, and the story was told. The only thing I'm going to say there was one of the best things that happened in my life that caused me a whole lot of just a resurgence of PTSD for a couple of days was I was on LinkedIn. You all know what LinkedIn is. And I see this name, Joanna Esparza. And I said, your name is very familiar to me, because I sent her dad a copy of the chapter in the book that has the action where I earned the medal. I said, does this make sense to you? And he says, well, yeah, it filled in a lot of things for me. So we have been talking over the years, just briefly, little on, little off. He got me turned on to Latin jazz, and she said, your name has been in my house since the day I was born. My dad is one of the greatest men I've ever met. Thank you for saving his life. And it just broke me in a good way. The best news I could ever have had was that what I did mattered. And to have a daughter say that about her father was overwhelming. And I kept laughing as I was telling my wife when she came home, because I was gray. I was right back in Vietnam. I had everything I used to have. It should have been one of the best times, and it was. But there was something about putting a period at the end of that sentence that just brought it all back. But, which is why in my book I say you have to fight the dragon every day. So I get back from Vietnam, and I get lucky enough to get a job with the Veterans Administration, and for the next 50 years, all I've done is work with veterans. I started as a veterans benefits counselor. I worked in a VA hospital. I worked in employment getting veterans jobs. I worked with the Illinois Attorney General's office appealing cases before the VA. I've testified before Congress on veteran affairs, on getting judicial review of VA claims. It's been my life's work. It's been something I totally enjoy. I am lucky enough to have 3 amazing kids that made it through all the BS that I threw at them with my post-traumatic stress. They are just amazing. They're an amazing legacy for me. And I couldn't be prouder. My daughter is a 6th grade teacher who takes no end of harassment from me because she's a teacher and gets way too much time off during the year. And among other things, you got to harass your daughter, don't you? My 2 boys, my one son's a headhunter, works in a talent acquisition. My other son works with AbbVie. And they made me very proud, as my grandkids have done. My granddaughter, my oldest son, lost his wife. And rather than going down a bad hole, he became an amazing dad. He stayed with the kids. He works hard. I got to help raise them for a bit while he was on the road doing things along with my wife, she who must be obeyed, Susie. And my granddaughter became Miss Lindenhurst and one of the queens, but had a program to help kids that went through the same trauma that she did. I want to end this. I now have a foundation, the Lynch Medal of Honor Veterans Foundation, where we help veterans that are in need. We help help veterans, I should say. And we've worked with a number of different ones. I want to close it with this. No matter what you've gone through in life, no matter how bad your life has been, it is your choice as to what you want to do with it. You can use it for good, or you can use it as a great big giant excuse to be a bonehead. It's all up to you. It's all up to you. And I've seen this so many times. I've surrounded myself over my life with disabled veterans because I used to have some of the best pity parties because I had post-traumatic stress and never got wounded, except for getting hit in the face with a coconut. And I have found veterans that had no legs, swimming. I met a young lady, beautiful young lady, who lost an arm at the Invictus Games. And I shook her hand, and she, because being an old guy, we shake ladies' hands differently than you probably do today if you shake hands. And so I shook her hands with this nice, firm, but gentle handshake. She crushed my hand. She was a weightlifter, one-armed weightlifter. She had pipes I could only dream of. So there's no bridge that you can't cross, no river you can't wade through, no mountain you can't climb if you want to. You just got to want it bad enough. So thank you for your time.
That was wonderful, Sergeant Lynch. Thank you so much. Please grab a seat. He said he's willing to take a few questions, so if you would just please raise your hand. We'll bring the mic out to you.
You said you were living in a trailer. How'd that happen?
Say again?
You said you were living in a trailer.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
My, for whatever reason, my dad decided that he wanted to move. And I think it was kind of my mom, because my dad, when my dad got off the bus, there was a bar. And a lot of times my mom would send me down to get him. So I think part of it was he was stopping off after work too much, so we moved out to Homewood and then Lake Eliza because of that. The trailer was like way small. But it was fun. It was some of the best time I had. We had walked about a mile to school, had a lot of good friends. It was when I got my second spanking, because I whipped a kid with a cord.
Other questions?
What would you say to someone considering joining the Army?
Have a big sense of humor and get in shape. And learn how to make your bed every day. It's a lot of fun. It's a great decision.
Any others?
Can you hear me? Okay. Hi. So I was wondering, you said the only time you got injured was when you got hit with the coconut. Would you mind telling that story? I didn't see that in the book. I just thought it was interesting.
So we're in a big firefight, and you know it's really not going. It's going okay, but not as well as it should. So we called in air rocket artillery, which are Huey gunships, and I'm also kind of a camera nut. So, and because again I'm not the sharpest pencil in the pack, I took off my helmet, and I was taking pictures of the chopper, because it was really cool. It was like firing right there, and I could, and I'm doing that, and as I'm getting cussed out by my battle buddy, I get hit right in the face with a coconut. Coconut shrapnel, It was about that big. I'm bleeding like, because your face bleeds. And he said, "Dude, you can get a Purple Heart." And I said, how the hell am I going to explain that? How did you get your Purple Heart, Mr. Lynch? I got hit in the face with a coconut. So that was it.
Any other questions? Okay. Actually, I'll take it up there with me. Well, at this time, I'd like to ask Professor Rhoda Seiler and her research writing students to join me on stage to present a gift of gratitude to Sergeant Lynch. So please come on up. You guys want to go through and shake his hand? You're welcome to. Yeah. Maybe after everyone shakes his hand, Randy, if we could get a picture of the class together with Sergeant Lynch. Come forward. Okay, we're going to get a picture, so if you can all come forward, and Randy's going to get your picture here. Just squeeze in a little bit. Great, thank you so much. You guys can go ahead and sit. So thank you, Sergeant Lynch, for serving our country and fighting for our freedoms. We're grateful for your willingness to share your story with us today. So please, a big round of applause for Sergeant Lynch. If you brought a copy of his book and would like to have it signed, please visit Sergeant Lynch at the table near the exit. Additionally, I'd like to invite everyone to visit our gallery downstairs to view our military artwork collection and the posters Professor Rodeseiler's students created this semester in celebration of Veterans Day. Thank you all for attending today. Thank you, sir.